A local middle school teacher busted for allegedly trying to meet up with one of his own students for sex.
He was a teacher. He was an adult placed in a role of authority and responsibility over young people.
The shocking allegations laid out in court documents alleging this beloved educator and coach is actually a sexual predator. And the twist that went down in a McDonald's parking lot, this guy apparently did not see coming. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It is a parent's worst nightmare that the person who you trust with your child every day at school, someone who you expect to look after your child, to teach your child, someone who maybe looked you in the eye once, is actually someone looking to take advantage of your child in the worst way possible.
Based on this investigation, trust was seriously violated in the most abhorrent fashion conceivable.
The police chief in Joliet, Illinois, outside Chicago, did not hold back in talking about Alex Beutikofer, a middle school PE teacher and a health teacher. He also worked as an assistant coach for a high school lacrosse team in the area. Now, before we get into the operation to take Beutikofer down at a McDonald's, I want to break down how this case started. On March 6th, police say administrators at Aux Sable Middle School gave them a call because a female student provided a statement that Mr. Beutikofer made her uncomfortable. Now, Beutikofer allegedly told this student to stay back after class. This student wanted her friend to be with her, but Beutikofer said it could only be her because he needed to talk to her about her grades. Now, the student said Beutikofer allegedly asked her to come over to his desk so he could show her her grades. The student says when she got close, he allegedly asked her to get closer. And when she did that, he allegedly put his hand on her shoulder for roughly 30 seconds. Now, just think about how uncomfortable it must have been in that room. Beutikofer then allegedly told the student she was his favorite, and he said he wanted to keep in touch outside of school. He then allegedly asked for her personal cell phone number, even her name on Snapchat. This is a 38-year-old man talking to a middle school student, allegedly. Now, when the student said no, Beutikofer then allegedly responded, quote, "Am I making you uncomfortable?" Frankly, he might be stating the obvious there. Now, to this student's credit, she went directly to school leaders after this alleged interaction, and she made a report, according to police. Beutikofer, when he was confronted about this, denied what the student said happened, but he did admit he had her stay after so they could look at some grades. But she was not the only student which this PE teacher apparently wanted to keep in touch with outside of school. 3 more students allegedly came forward saying that Beutikofer had asked for their personal contact information, including Snapchat names. Now, this is the police report that we have, and you can see it is heavily redacted with the written statements made by students. Now, police say at this point, Beutikofer was placed on administrative leave. And it is important to note that at this point, he wasn't accused of anything sexual, just acting inappropriately with this student where he had this inappropriate alleged contact by putting his hand on her shoulder. But then this story went to a new level. A couple days later, over the weekend, the rep for the teachers union said that Beutikofer had contacted them and he asked to submit his resignation. So it appears that Beutikofer did not want any more investigating to be done in this case. Too late, because this story is about to take a turn that made the suspicions about this teacher's behavior inside the classroom even more concerning.
Given the nature of these allegations and the ongoing concern for student safety, detectives implemented a proactive investigative strategy. Between April 6th and April 17, 2026, with the knowledge and consent of the victim's family, detectives conducted a text-based undercover operation in which detectives made communication via text message with Beutikofer under the guise of being a student.
Police say Beutikofer thought he was speaking with one of his students. There was a student who came forward and said that he had once asked for her personal cell phone information in the library, and she gave it to him. And so that's what authorities used to talk to Beutikofer. Detectives say that Beutikofer kept trying to move the conversation from text messaging to Snapchat.
During this undercover operation, Beutikofer continued communicating with what he believed to be a current female student at Aux Sable. These conversations became increasingly sexual in nature and highly inappropriate. He made repeated attempts to move the conversation to another platform, requested images, and worked to arrange private, in-person meetings. Through these exchanges, Beutikofer demonstrated clear understanding that he believed he was communicating with a 14-year-old female.
Here in the police report is where we believe the specifics of what Beutikofer allegedly said over text have been redacted. Now, police say based on what Beutikofer was allegedly saying, they had enough to get a warrant for his arrest. Beutikofer was initially charged with 2 counts of aggravated battery and 1 count of indecent solicitation of a child. Then it was time to allegedly catch him in the act. And to do that, police made a plan at a fast food restaurant.
Later that evening, under the continued guise of a student, detectives arranged a meeting with Beutikofer at the McDonald's restaurant located at 2007 Bridge Street in Yorkville, Illinois. During communication leading up to this meeting, Beutikofer expressed an intent to engage in sexual activity with whom he believed, once again, to be a 14-year-old female student in the vehicle in a parking lot. Shortly before 8 p.m. on April 17th, officers and detectives from the Joliet Police Department, including members of the Investigations Division, Tactical, Narcotics, and a neighborhood policing team, along with members of the Yorkville Police Department, conducted surveillance of that McDonald's. Beutikofer arrived alone in what was later learned to be a rental vehicle and entered the business, where he purchased food as requested during the communications. After exiting the restaurant, he was taken into custody following a brief struggle with officers.
Here's the full body cam video police sent us of his arrest.
Police, get out of the ground! Police, get out of the ground! Get out of the ground! Stop resisting! We got this on. We got this on. Get some cuffs. We got him right here. I got cuffs right here. Go ahead, buddy. Here you go. You want me to roll on your side? Sit up. Ready? Let's stand him up. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold on. Who's transport? Okay. Let's do a car with a can. He's good. Let's do your car for transport.
All right, let's talk to the hop with somebody else then.
Sounds good. Need another camera car? Let's go. Follow him down. Sorry. Going to the West Station? Let me confirm. Follow them down.
Now you can see Beutikofer, after the chaos of taking him to the ground, he's just kind of standing there silently. His head is down. He did have what appeared to be a bag of McDonald's in his hands when he was tackled to the ground, and that's actually very important to the case that's being built against him, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, once Beutikofer was in cuffs, police searched his vehicle. And remember, this guy allegedly thought he was going to meet up with one of his own middle school students. And it is shocking and disgusting. Police say Beutikofer is now charged with traveling to meet a child, solicitation to meet a child, 2 counts of grooming, and 4 counts of indecent solicitation of a child. Police say when they tried to question Beutikofer after his arrest, he asked for a lawyer. Detectives say the student from Aux Sable Middle School's parents, the one who Beutikofer thought he was communicating with, they have filed a no-contact order against the teacher. Now, Beutikofer wasn't only a teacher at a middle school. He's since been fired from that job, but he also worked as an assistant boys lacrosse coach at a nearby high school. We searched, and back in 2020, the team's booster club wrote on Facebook, quote, "At Hinsdale Central, we have been fortunate to have had Alex Beutikofer as our freshman head coach for over a decade. Alex is also involved in a local lacrosse program that happens to be offering some local summer opportunities that many of our lacrosse athletes are also involved in. Given our lost season, he thought many of you might be interested and is encouraging your involvement this summer. This is open to any level player, including new players, and starts next week." So it appears he was someone who had the trust of a lot of people. And as you heard police say, that trust was allegedly broken. Now, Beutikofer has reportedly been fired from that position at the lacrosse team following his arrest as well. Joining us now to talk more about this case is Will Corman, criminal defense attorney. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. It's fascinating on a lot of levels. I mean, certainly concerning, but just how this investigation went down, and it culminates in a McDonald's parking lot, and they take down Alex Beutikofer. But it's so disturbing that he thought he was talking to one of his students. But from a legal standpoint, like, how does the law see that? I think we've all seen like To Catch a Predator back in the day. It really feels like this was exactly that. Like, how strong does the case seem at this point where, and I'm not defending the guy by any means, but like, he did not have sexual contact with anybody to our knowledge, but still is facing incredibly serious charges?
I mean, I think this, from a defense standpoint, this is a very difficult case. This would be very difficult to defend. It sounds like the police set the stage accordingly. They waited, they lined everything up almost perfectly, and then at the last possible minute, they came in to make the arrest. So from a defense standpoint, this is a tough one, to be sure.
Well, and it's interesting where they, you know, and to kind of go back to the old To Catch a Predator reference, like it always seemed like they had the person that they were going to take down in a sting, like they had to bring something that they allegedly talked about online. And in this case, police say they had asked him to go and order something specifically at McDonald's. And then you do see in the body cam video when he's tackled to the ground, like he has that McDonald's bag in his hand. Legally, why is it important that there's that connection there of them doing something, bringing something specific to the scene?
So they're trying to exclude a possible defense of, I'm just at the wrong place at the wrong time, or this wasn't real, or I didn't actually think this was going anywhere. If they say you need to buy a Big Mac and 2 orders of large fries, and the guy just happens to say, I didn't know this was real, this was all a fantasy, then why are you buying exactly what the cops asked you to purchase? So it's forestalling or cutting off a possible defense of, I never actually thought this was real, this was just fantasy role play, I never was going to go through with anything. Then why are you doing exactly what the police asked you to do?
And they say he allegedly had a sex toy in his car, which is just, I mean, it's shocking because the allegations of what was going down at school, like it was creepy to say the least. Sure. And then there's apparently these students that all, like multiple students came forward saying like he just wanted their Snapchat names or their personal phone numbers. And we're talking about young teenage girls here. Could he be, was there anything about that? Because like he ends up resigning before the investigation could be completed, it seems, from the school. But as far as keeping the student back, kind of crossing those lines, like, is there anything criminal there that he could be facing for that?
So obviously that depends jurisdiction by jurisdiction. If there was some inappropriate touching, and I don't mean actual indecent touching, but if there was some inappropriate touching, perhaps that could lend itself to criminal charges. But simply asking inappropriate questions of a student of that nature, can I have your phone number? Can I have your Snapchat handle? Will you friend me on Facebook, or whatever the social media context is? I don't know if that rises to the level of criminal conduct. I actually hope it doesn't, because that brings in all sorts of First Amendment implications and the like. Obviously, it's cause for concern. If this gentleman were employed in my kid's school district, I would certainly want him terminated as a result of it. But I don't think that in and of itself rises to the level of criminal conduct. It's when it begins to get into the area of asking personal questions. Certainly, obviously, what ended up happening with what he believed to be a 14-year-old student. Who are we kidding? At that point, we're grooming, we're setting up a meeting, we're soliciting, all those things. And obviously, that's a crime.
Yeah, and you look at the police report, there's a lot that is redacted, and I'm sure it is incredibly graphic. It was enough for police to be able to get an arrest warrant on him, and then that leads to this investigation. I want to talk about the timeline, because it's the whole thing is shocking, but like we go back to March is when this alleged inappropriate situation takes place with a student. He ends up resigning through the teachers union. A couple days later, he's completely done with the district by the 13th, they say. The arrest doesn't happen until April. So it's like that ends, and then the investigation begins like after he's fired, it seems. And yet here he is continuing on with it until April when he's arrested. It's like, and he was already fired for being very creepy, it seems, at school.
Sure. I mean, look, the amount of information out there, as you said before, about these to catch a predator stings and so on and so forth. It's not as if he's the first guy ever to be caught up in this. He's the umpteenth thousandth person to be caught up in this. So it really is a combination of, candidly, and I certainly don't know the gentleman, some unbridled arrogance / narcissism. I'm different. I'm not going to get caught, or my relationship with these kids is different. They would never turn me in. And unfortunately, a perverse sexual compulsion towards underage females. So it's the twin effect of those two things that lets somebody who, as you said so correctly, gets terminated for all intents and purposes from work for doing this, and then weeks later is still saying in his own mind, oh, this student will never turn me in. This student really likes me. I'm okay. I can keep doing this because I'll be able to get away with it. I mean, the arrogance is shocking and frightening.
Well, and I'm sure when the text messages, if a jury has to read those, if it even gets to that point, would just be, enough, I'm sure, to get like a pretty strong conviction. But like, how could a prosecutor use that where, because I just look at this and it's like, he's the one asking for phone numbers. He's the one to multiple students. And he's the one like wasn't even scared off by the fact that he loses his job for
Sure.
being inappropriate like this. And yet here he is, and eventually leads to this sting in the parking lot.
I mean, I think all those steps in the chain, or all those links in the chain, I should say, are very important for a prosecutor, because again, what the defense could only be is either this is all a big misunderstanding. I mean, you and I have talked about cases where, some older gentleman wants to really help out a kid and is
Right.
actually meeting with the kid to talk to them about how dangerous it is. There was a police chief out in Western Massachusetts, I believe we talked about, who basically said, I'm only following up with these kids to scare them straight, essentially. Those text messages cut against that. Who are we kidding? Especially if the text messages, as we assume in this case, are sexual in nature. You're not just meeting up with a kid to scare them straight. You're meeting up with a kid because you have an idea of what you want to do with them sexually. So the links in the chain cut against that defense, and the links in the chain also cut against that this is all a fantasy, as we talked about earlier. If law enforcement asked him to pick up specific items, then he can't say, I was just going through this as a fantasy and I wasn't going to get that far. Because if I were the prosecutor, what I would say is, this guy lived X number of miles from this McDonald's, and he had the opportunity to turn around at this red light, at this stop sign, at this intersection, and he kept going and he kept going. He got to McDonald's. He had the opportunity to say, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Not get out of the car. He had the opportunity to walk into McDonald's and say, oh my God, what am I doing? And walk out. He could have done any of those things. And he went all the way from wherever he lives to that McDonald's, into the store, bought the exact items law enforcement asked him to, came back out, and that's when he was arrested. It's a strong case for the prosecution. It sure is.
Yeah, it really seems that way. And I keep thinking back to the young lady who really cooperated, like handed her phone number over and like allowed law enforcement to kind of take it from there. Like, and even I think back to the student who had this alleged inappropriate experience with this teacher and then goes straight to the school's leadership as opposed to maybe brushing it off. And, you certainly understand how difficult it can be to come forward when someone is the victim of even something inappropriate like that. And I kind of go back to like when we've seen the stings and they're online and of course, To Catch a Predator was the most famous probably show when that ran on NBC back in the day. But, the critics of stings like this would say it's entrapment. Which I'm not a lawyer, but that's usually like the comment section might say something like that. What is actually entrapment in the grand scheme of like talking about these type of stings, and like what would actually cross the line?
So as the law has evolved over time, entrapment defense in these cases is getting more and more difficult to do. And that's exactly why there is this text chain. That's why the chain is important, because somewhere in that text chain, it's almost inevitable that law enforcement reminded this guy of how old the young lady was, right? So that he can't say, I assumed, and again, he was a teacher, so putting that aside, so he obviously knows how old she was. But even putting that aside, they don't want him to be able to say, oh, I had no idea how old she was. She never told me her age. I assumed that she was of age. Somewhere in that chat, I can almost guarantee you there is a comment along the lines of, I'm only 14, right? Or, I'm not turning 15 for a couple months. And inevitably, the gentleman said, doesn't matter to me. Age is just a number. I mean, we've seen this a million times. That's how they get through that. So once the guy says, I don't care how old you are, then all bets are off for all intents and purposes. They really are. So entrapment is very difficult in these cases. I suppose hypothetically, if law enforcement took over the student's phone, sent this guy a text and said, hi, I don't know if you remember me. I was your student and I find you attractive. And the guy said, whoa, you're a student, you're underage. And law enforcement disguised as the student kept pushing and pushing and pushing, then maybe there would be something. This does not sound like that in any way, shape, or form.
No, and I also think of like in some cases we see like police may have a pseudonym and it's someone who approaches they're on a chat room and they don't know who this person is, but they know their particular age, and then they go to a location, the sting goes down. Like he thought this was one of his students that he knew personally, who he reached out to. I mean, that has to be, it just seems like it's piling up. If you're the defense attorney on this case, like it's going to be pretty hard.
If I'm the defense attorney on this case, I'm looking for a plea as soon as possible.
What does that look like? Because if you're a prosecutor at the same time, I don't know if you would even need to take a student and put them on the stand. Like you have these text messages, you have all these things, and you could just, he seems dead to rights, and we'll see how it all plays out. He's certainly innocent until proven guilty, but like, sure. How does that go when like you may not really have the leverage to get a great deal for a client?
Well, the fact of the matter is this, right? I don't care what state you're in. I don't care what county you're in. I don't care what court you're in. The courts are overburdened. The courts are overworked. And there's always some benefit to resolving a case sooner rather than later. It frees up court time for other cases. It frees up juries to hear other trials. So there's almost always some benefit to resolving a case in the short term rather than dragging it all the way out. And that's really all it is here. We're not making the government go through the paces. We're not making them do much. So therefore, whatever credit we could possibly get, that's what we're looking for here.
Yeah, and if there's I don't think there's a lot of like, happy endings in stories one way or another, but able to get this guy before he allegedly, based off everything that's been alleged against him, be able to get him in custody in a sting as opposed to, after the fact of committing, something horrific. Will Corman, criminal defense attorney, always great to talk about these stories with you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. We're also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. See you next time.